What a headshot! What a head!
How's it guys, this is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, I'll be taking you guys through the ELITE64 team selection for the upcoming double game week 22. Now for those of you who are simply new to the channel or maybe new to the series, what the ELITE64 is, it's 64 of the best managers in an invitational league by the FPL General, who I'm pretty sure all of you guys do know. Now there is kind of a qualifier league, so don't worry, we do still have relegation and promotion in this league, so it is quite competitive. Now as I am a member of the ELITE64, I'm included in the sample, and you guys will see that right at the end of the video when I discuss the Game Week 22 ownership of the United assets. So the reason I decided to go over the ELITE64, give you guys a refresher of what the current template is going to be looking like, is I wanted to get the video out before the kind of chip strategy gets too hectic, just to show you guys a little bit of an update. Now in this video, I'll be discussing various talking points such as how many chips have been used in the ELITE64, the Captaincy debate in terms of differentials, and then finally I'll be detailing the double Game Week 22 ownership of those United midfielders. So that's something you guys are interested in? Sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. Now to start off the ELITE64 update, I want to give you guys an update on the rankings of the ELITE64. Now yes, I do know we're only kind of 21 game weeks in, not the end of the world if you're not in the kind of top 10k, top 100k, but I want to give you guys some perspective if you guys aren't in this league to show you where the elite managers are currently sitting at. Now the first kind of ranked division I want to show you guys is going to be the top 10k, the kind of cherry on top, what every FPL manager wants to strive for. But only 3.1% of the ELITE64 are actually in the top 10k at the start of Game Week 22. So 3.1%, that's only 2 managers exactly in the top 10k out of these 64 managers. What this shows you is that the top 10k is super hard to reach. I wouldn't kind of assess this right now though in terms of the quality of the league, and I think after the doubles and the blanks have progressed and once all the chips are out on the table, we can then judge the top 10k finish. Moving on to the top 100k, we see that the number increase to 12.5%. This is going to include that 3.1% obviously. And then if we look at the top 1 million, we therefore have a respective stat of at least 80% of the ELITE64 are within the top 1 million. Now I'm not kind of tuning these managers, I'm not kind of saying that you guys should be in the top 10k. I just want to simply show you guys perspective when we look at this elite league and why you shouldn't stress about your rank at the current moment. Now where these managers will finish will be a whole different story. I do however think the top 10k every season is getting harder and harder to reach, and therefore should we actually be going for a top 100k finish instead of a top 10k. You guys can let me know in the comments down below what your kind of goal is. My goal is always as high as possible, but in terms of the top 10k, I always like to get those. Now we're going to shift the attention from the overall ranks in terms of the chip strategy, and we're going to be detailing the triple captaincy. Now there are other chips to use, for example the wildcard, but not many of the managers have used the second wildcard. We have the Friet, not many of the ELITE64 have used the Friet, and we have the bench boost, which I think only a few have actually used, and that's what the triple captain is going to be the main chip. So in terms of double game week 20, if you guys do recall, I used my own triple captain on Erling Haaland. He ended up on 8 points if I do recall. Pretty fail of a triple captain. I always say 15 points is where you guys want to reach for a triple captaincy. And of course he scores the hat-trick last game week to rub a little bit of salt in the wounds. But including myself, 54.7% of the ELITE64 used the triple captaincy in double game week 20, and that's going to leave 45.3% still to use the chip. Now the reason I want to detail this is just to show you guys that the current consensus is that you guys should be using it in double game week 22 and double game week 23, and I'm pretty sure if we did a refresh come game week 24, most managers in the ELITE64 would have used that triple captaincy chip. But like in yesterday's ultimate guide, super jealous of those of you who still have the chip. I reckon either Rashford this week or even Haaland next week will get more than 8 points. Let me know in the comments down below, are you guys using the triple captain this week or next week, or are you actually holding it for a later stage in the season? Now as mentioned earlier on, the other chips, the Friet, the second wildcard, and the bench boost, most of these chips are still in the back pocket of most of the ELITE64, and those will be used at a later stage of the season as well. But now going on to the actual template of the ELITE64, and what I've done here from left to right, we're going to go from highest owned to lowest owned, but basically these are going to be the top 5 in the defense, the midfield, and the top 3 in terms of the forwards. I also want to say that most of the bench kind of fodder players, an Andreas Pereira, a Patterson, a Bueno from Wolves, I haven't included most of these options here because they're quite highly owned because as mentioned they are bench fodder. But if you guys do want those ownership stats or any ownership of other options, comment it down below and I'll reach out to you guys in the comments. But to start off the kind of review of the template, let's go over the goalkeeper department, and we have 2 goalkeepers that are very highly owned, and then the third option, Edison, is pretty lowly owned. So those 2 options are going to be Danny Ward and then also Kepa from Chelsea, 98.4% and 87.5%. But what you guys can assume here is that Kepa is the majority goalkeeper for the ELITE64. As mentioned a little bit earlier on, that Edison's ownership was around 7%, so if you guys do own him, that's a massive differential. But it is quite interesting to see because I think many options have a Chelsea defender besides a Kepa, and therefore if you guys are kind of rolling with the ELITE64 template, you want some Chelsea defensive coverage, as Kepa's actually been getting a few points these past game weeks. Moving on to the defensive department, and no 100% owned defender this time. A little bit surprising to me that Trippier is owned by just above 98%. As with as many bonus points as he's been getting, I would almost consider him essential. But I did see an interesting fact about actually Trippier, some of the best managers in the world, historic kind of Hall of Fame, number 1, number 2, number 3. Some of these high-ranked managers haven't owned Trippier this entire season and are simply going for other Newcastle defenders. But that's not going to be me, and I wouldn't advise that, as Trippier has been a great asset, especially if you guys did buy him quite cheap. Next up is going to be Luke Shaw before double game week, but he has fallen ill. But what I would say is that please watch the game tonight. Hopefully he's going to be back in that kind of starting 11 or even the squad, as I really do need him for double game week 22. But so does 89.1% of the ELITE64, and I'm pretty sure you guys do own Luke Shaw. Definitely the best United defender to get. Then moving on to Ben White from Arsenal, 84.4%. A little bit surprising here that another Arsenal defender didn't kind of pop up within the top 5, but I think this is because Ben White is so cheap and hopefully he does hold his place. Now, we'll mention this in the team selection, but I'm slightly worried about Ben White potentially losing his place to a Tomiyasu. However, I do think the more likely strategy is to kind of start him from Arteta and then take him off for Tomiyasu late in the fixture. But we'll be in a similar boat if he does get benched, as 84.4%, and as you guys can see, that first 3 defense is going to be your back 3. So just to say that again, in terms of the kind of template options to go for in the defense, it's going to be Trippier, Shaw and Ben White, as next in line are going to be the drop-off players. So this is where we will kind of fit in Patterson and Bueno as that kind of cheap bench fodder, but I decided to exclude them as they're going to be on your bench most game weeks. So now going on to the next 2 options, and these are kind of the rotation piece options. We've got Botman and then Nathan Ake. Now both these 2 options are owned by kind of 20% less of the ELITE64, and therefore can provide some nice differentials. Now what I want to show you with Botman is that the ELITE64 isn't too big of a fan of the double up, and if you guys have kind of seen the effective ownership, that Newcastle double up in defense has been a key strategy for other managers. So I would suggest going for it as long as the Newcastle fixtures stay pretty strong. As we saw in yesterday's Ultimate Guide, the stats from a defensive point of view are looking rock solid. Then moving on to Nathan Ake, just had the news obviously that Cancelo is off to Bayern Munich on loan, and therefore Nathan Ake looks like a sensible option to get in that defensive department. But don't worry, he's not kind of oversaturated, 12.5% only of the ELITE64, so if you guys do want to jump on him, still quite a nice differential. But as you guys can see, definitely the template's going to be the first 3 options, then Botman and Ake come in as nice rotation pieces. Now moving on to our forward line, and none other than Marcus Rashford as the highest owned midfielder. Yet again, not any kind of midfielders are owned by 100% of the ELITE64, which is actually quite surprising. But I do think that Rashford ownership will reach 100% come next game week, as I think you are quite brave to go without him in double game week 22. Then moving on to Kevin De Bruyne, definitely the premium midfielder of choice, 84.4%, similar to kind of Ben White's ownership, and he's been a mainstay from most people's wildcards. Now the big thing about De Bruyne is the double game week 23 fixture. I see a lot of managers actually want to take Bruno in for De Bruyne. We discussed that as well in the Ultimate Guide yesterday, but spoiler alert, I was a little bit against it. Talking about kind of transfer plans, Martinelli is going to be a name that most people have been mentioning. Should you take him out for an Odegaard, a Saka? Hasn't really been performing that well, but he is owned by 73.4%. So it'll be interesting to see in a couple game weeks time what actually these managers do. Most of the ELITE64 are quite conservative, and therefore taking Martinelli out for Odegaard or Saka is probably a little bit sideways for them. A player though that might be a transfer out, especially with blank game week 25 fastly approaching, it's Almiron from Newcastle. Now he's owned by just less than 60% of the ELITE64, but at his cheap price point, it might be a hold and bench for those blank game weeks. Now the final option to go for, and yet again you guys can see kind of a massive drop off here. We're going from 60% to 15% with Bukayo Saka from Arsenal. Now he comes in with 15.6%, so really lowly owned if you guys still want to go for him, which is quite surprising to me because amongst the masses, Saka's a really notable option. But you guys can definitely see a template forming at the back 3, the midfield 4. Let's see if it continues into the forward department. Spoiler alert, it's definitely going to continue. We've got Erling Haaland with 100%, so we are our first option owned by every manager in the ELITE64, which is understandable, especially after his hat-trick against Wolves in Game Week 21. But we'll be touching on the Captaincy debate in the next talking point, as there was a little bit of surprise there in terms of the Captaincy. It wasn't 100%. We then have Sir Harry Kane at 73.4%, a really high owned kind of premium option. You guys can see that the formation of the threemium is definitely prevalent in the ELITE64. The final option is going to be Mitrovic at 67.2%, so a really high owned option amongst the ELITE64, and therefore completing our kind of 3-4-3 template. Now with Mitrovic, I think Nketiah will be a popular option if you guys don't have a triple up, and therefore that might be a recommended move come Game Week 23. But as you guys can see on screen right now, the 3-4-3 template definitely has formed. Will this kind of switch up? I don't really think so. Maybe come that first wildcard, Game Week 29, Game Week 33, wherever you guys are using it. We might see some formation changes there, but for now we might see some adjustment with those transfers. That United attack, the Man City attack, and the Arsenal attack are going to be viable with those double game weeks coming up. But comment down below how many of the ELITE64 do you guys own at the current moment. I won't lie to you guys, my team is pretty template, but my midfield is slightly different. Now moving into the end portion of our video, I just want to give you guys a reminder about the captaincy debate, and the reason I'm doing this is that I mentioned this in the ultimate guide yesterday that I was considering going for a more differential option, and that's what I want to talk about right now. So in terms of the captaincy stats for Game Week 21, we have Erling Haaland with 90.6%, then the second option was Kevin De Bruyne with 4.7%. So as you guys can see, not everyone in the ELITE64 did get those hat-trick points doubled from Erling Haaland against Wolves, and unfortunately 5% actually went for Kevin De Bruyne. There obviously were some other selections. I think Harry Kane was a similar kind of captaincy in terms of De Bruyne. Then we obviously had Fantasy Football Scout as who captained Matoma. So the reason I want to kind of detail this is that I wanted to go a little bit more in depth into what I was meaning with the differential captain for Game Week 22. So obviously I was talking about Fernandes versus Rashford. In this case, it was going to be Haaland versus De Bruyne. And the reason I didn't go for De Bruyne is that Haaland is the main talisman in that team. So yes, you guys might argue that Rashford is the main talisman. I do agree with you, but I think the points might be more split in that United attack. So if you guys do want to go for a differential, this is an example of kind of a bad differential captain, whereas double Game Week 22, in my opinion, is a much closer debate. So if you guys do want to take a risk, I think Game Week 22 might be the game week to do it in, but obviously we do have hindsight from Game Week 21. Maybe this is a reminder yet again that not everyone in the ELITE64 is super conservative, with about 3 managers actually captaining De Bruyne over Haaland in Game Week 21. But you guys can let me know your thoughts heading into this upcoming game week. Are you looking at a differential option? Do you agree that it's a lot closer between Fernandes and Rashford than De Bruyne and Haaland? And who are you captaining going into the upcoming game week? Now the final talking point to go over, I just want to give you guys a refresh of what the ELITE64 is dealing with for the upcoming game week 22, and I'll be going over the United midfielders. Now in terms of the attackers, we do have a Martial on about 12%. Is he going to be fit for the upcoming game week? Who kind of knows? And that's why I haven't gone over him. In terms of the defenders, we just saw Luke Shaw with the massive ownership. The second highest owned option is going to be Martinez, but he's really lowly owned. So in terms of midfield options, we obviously had Marcus Rashford with a massive 96.9%, but the second highest owned option is going to be Bruno Fernandes at 14.1%. So as you guys can see that Bruno is very lowly owned within the ELITE64 compared to a Marcus Rashford, and definitely a differential if you guys want to get him in, and even a mega differential if you want to captain him. Now the next option I want to talk about is going to be a shout out to myself, Anthony. So at the current moment, I'm the only one within the ELITE64 that does own him. So that 1.56% is from your boy, but that's not really a bragging matter. So if you guys do want to get Anthony in, I would probably suggest otherwise. I think that Bruno Fernandes is definitely the option to get in if you guys do want to go for your triple up, as Anthony's been nothing but disappointment for me at this current moment. But as you guys can see, in terms of this kind of double up or triple up on the United assets, not a lot of these ELITE64 managers actually have that triple up complete. They have Rashford, they have Luke Shaw, but they don't have that third differential asset. Comment down below which third option you guys are bringing in. Are you even going for a third asset, or are you sticking with your double up and prioritizing other teams? This is going to kind of wrap up the video on the ELITE64 roundup. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this update. Don't forget to like it if you did, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys for the team selection coming up tomorrow as we do detail our 2 free transfers. But I'm myself, Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.